Hi, I'm Deborah, business owner and mom to Gen Z kids on a mission to make sure they get hired and become financially independent as soon as possible. If you're a parent wanting to get your kids hired or a new job seeker desperately trying to get hired, this show is for you, and I am so glad you're here. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. So today I have a special guest on who is not only one of my absolute favorite people in the world, but he's also proof that career paths aren't always linear. He graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with a math degree and quickly realized the 9-to-5 desk life was not for him. Instead, he took on one of the most competitive and respected careers out there. Now, after years of grit and perseverance, he's a pilot in the U.S. Air Force. In this episode, we talk about his unconventional journey, the many challenges he overcame, and what it really takes to carve your own path. Without further ado, please welcome my brother, Jeremy. Okay, welcome, Jer. I want to talk a little about, so you went to college. Tell us what you majored in. Tell us what happened as soon as you graduated and a little bit about your story.
Sure, yeah. So what I majored in, well, if you remember, I started with biology and then I didn't like that and I switched over to business, didn't like that. And I eventually just landed on math, really just because that's what I was good at and it required the least amount of effort in learning, really on my part. And I felt like it, had a decent chance of panning out into a job in the future. So math, and then at some point I decided to get a stats minor. So math and stats at Cal Poly SLO, and yeah, graduated at the end of 2011.
My brother got a perfect score on his math SAT. And
Mm,
so major
I
nerd,
did.
obviously. So the fact that he majored in math just because it was easy is hysterical to me because my brain just does not work on that left side.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
I will say math was easy the first couple years, but then when it got into the upper echelon, higher level math, it actually did become quite difficult. So I learned
oh,
that,
well,
but
good.
yeah, it was a little late in the game to change a fourth time, so just stuck it out.
But I think that's so important to note is that so often students like kind of panic and spiral. I know I see it with my kids where they're like, I don't know what I want to do. And that's so normal. And changing your major often is so normal. Even for kids that go in thinking, oh, I want to be a lawyer or I want to be, whatever. I find that it evolves the more information you glean from that major. So,
Yeah, and Cal Poly, you remember, you have to declare your major before you even show up. So you can't just
which is
show up
wild.
undecided. Yeah, so I really had no idea. I picked bio because, I thought I wanted to be an optometrist. I did that internship after high school. So yeah, it was just a lot of figuring it out. I kind of thought at the time, I was like, oh, I'll graduate, I'll have a degree, I'll just throw out some resumes and I'll just get hired and then work and that's life. And it's not how it was at all. So probably should have attended some more job fairs or tried to get an internship somewhere. But the way I got my first kind of interviews, I would say, were there was somebody, an alum from Cal Poly within the company that reached out to Cal Poly stats department saying, hey, we're looking for these types of people for this job. Who do you got, basically? And the department sent out the email, and I basically just replied to that email. And that kind of got the ball rolling. And that was for FICO, for credit scoring, as an analytic science consultant.
Also, the other thing I want to stop and point out here is with a math and stats degree, it's very general. And I feel like when we would tell people, oh, my brother, is graduating with a math degree, people automatically assumed, oh, is he going to teach?
Yep.
And I feel like when you have an open-ended degree like that, whether it be business, communications, math, English, things of this nature, there's just so many options. And this is a great example of you didn't even know that this position existed when you were majoring in math in college. So you get the job.
And I pretty much just said yes, because it was, in my major, and I just thought that's how that went, Oh, I'm a math major, stats guy, I should be doing this type of job. And the money was pretty enticing as well at the time. So, yeah, I think I moved up to Northern California like a month or two later.
Okay. And so you were making great money in your first real job. And if I remember correctly, they did not really support you in terms of training. Like they kind of just threw you out on your own to figure it out.
Yeah, so I think the difficult part was they had their own unique coding program, which, I didn't know. So I basically had to teach myself this coding program, and it ended up being very stressful, a lot of work, little direction, and yeah, it just, I was not happy.
Right. I remember you saying, I just can't sit behind this desk any longer. And I feel like that's when
Hmm.
you kind of had like an epiphany. Like, I'm not happy doing this. I know I went to school in theory to use this math degree, God knows how, which,
Hmm.
and you ended up in this position, you were miserably unhappy. I remember we were all a little worried, like, what's going to happen. So at that time, things started to erode. What happened after that?
Just showing up every day, 8 to 10 hours in front of a computer. I wasn't really getting it. And eventually, I would say after about a year, they kind of just said, "Hey, this isn't really working out." And I said, "I agree." And we just parted ways. And
Okay.
yeah, then I moved back down to Southern California and started the job process all over again, basically.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to point out about this is, again, I hear students say, "Oh, well, I guess I could do this job, it's easy." But easy, hard, whatever it is, if it doesn't like make you happy, and again, your first job is likely not going to be ideal, your perfect position, but if you're truly miserable, you gotta pick yourself up and focus on something else because sticking at something like that for years to come is just miserable.
Yeah, and I think I said this at the time, but at 23, I thought, if I just make a bunch of money Monday through Friday, then I can just party on the weekends with all this money I make and it'll make me happy. And it was not the case at all. I just, got home exhausted, Saturday chilled, and then Sunday I just had the Sunday scaries going to work Monday. So,
Right, right.
yeah.
Okay, so you came to live with me, and then you got this wild idea in your head that still is shocking when I say it out loud, but totally changed your trajectory. And one of the things I really want to focus on in this interview is this next life decision and what that did for you. So tell everybody
Mhm.
what happened next.
Yeah. So I actually had done a little bit of work into this before I even went to FICO. I talked to an Air Force officer recruiter, and we put a package together. I'd actually taken the AFOQT, which is the test you have to take, and they get the scores and put it in your package. I never submitted that first one because I got that job at FICO, and I thought, oh, this is makes sense. This is what I'm supposed to do. So I tabled that after FICO. I said, maybe I'll just go back to that. And I started into it a little bit more and talked to a recruiter again to get that ball rolling. So, yeah, I just started the process of commissioning in the Air Force.
Our mother
Oh,
was
yeah.
beside
She hated
herself.
it.
She hated
She was like, "You're gonna die
it.
for sure. Like, what are you doing? You're so smart." Like, she didn't understand at the time. Because, we had Uncle Joe, but none of our family members really close to us are in the military. So,
Right. Right.
mom
It
and
was
dad didn't really
definitely
know.
out of left field. No, mom and dad were freaked out. And I remember
Yeah.
at the time, like I was super supportive because while our parents were unraveling, going, he can't go into the military. This is terrible. You had such conviction and you were like, this is what I want. And I remember saying to them, he wants this. This is
Hmm.
his path, his future. And although it's such a disparity, I mean, we just obviously it wasn't up to us anyway, but we had to, support you. So, okay. So you applied to officer training school,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
Okay. And the reason you applied to officer training school is because you already had your bachelor's degree, so you, in theory, could go into the military as a commissioned officer.
Yes.
However, everybody, it's funny because when I talk to people that don't know anything about the military, they're like, oh, well, he has a degree, so he's going to be an officer. And it's like, not exactly how that
Yeah.
works. So in your
Maybe, yeah.
situation, what
Yeah,
happened?
30 years ago. So
Right.
my situation, it's not easy necessarily. Even if you're just enlisting, there are a lot of hoops to jump through. The military in general is pretty selective at times, depending on, what their manning's looking like that year. So you can't just walk in, sign up, and then go to boot camp the next day, you know. It
Right.
doesn't work like that anymore, especially with commissioning programs. And just a little bit of background, the Air Force takes their officers mainly from the Academy, Air Force Academy, and then
Hmm.
ROTC, which is college prep courses. Basically, you do this while you're going to do your undergrad, and then you'll graduate and commission like that. And then the very last part is officer training school, which is you just apply kind of off the street. So I
But
submitted
still with
my,
a degree. You still have
yes,
to have a degree. Okay.
yes, for
So even though
commissioned officer.
civilian off the street, you have to have your bachelor's degree to apply to an OTS program. Okay.
Yep,
And
yep,
and for the Navy, it's called OCS, I think. Everybody
yep.
has a different
Candidate
program,
school.
every branch. Okay.
Hmm.
So you applied. What happened?
Yep. So round one of me applying, you know, you submit it and then you wait months, basically. It has to meet a board and do all this stuff. And I did not get selected. And I was like, dang, well, now what do I do?
And
And
at
it was,
this point, mom and I were like, what do you mean you don't want him? How
yeah.
could you not want our perfect specimen? What? I remember mom and I were so pissed. We were actually in a dressing room trying on
Mm.
clothes. We were shopping one day and you called and you were like, I didn't get it. And I remember we were in tears of how could they not want you?
Yeah, I got
I
an
it
800
was
on my math SAT score. Like, what are they thinking?
what do you mean? How did
Yeah,
you not want my brother? So,
yeah.
anyway, you this is a really good example of a story of adversity because
Hmm.
literally you did not get in. So, what did you do then?
Well, after several hours of crying, I decided to pick myself back up and just say, you know what? Let's try again. Because they have boards that meet every so often. It's depending on the year, maybe like 6 months or 3 months, sometimes maybe once a year. So I just went back to my recruiter and said, hey, like, let's try again. Because each board has different selection rates. You know, sometimes it's, 50%, sometimes it's 15%. So it
Mhm.
really depends on timing too. But yeah, I just went in, started trying again. I said, what can I do to be more competitive? They're talking about, well, maybe if you get some flight hours, you can improve what's called a pick-some score. It's just something you add to your application. Because I was applying for a rated position, which is all the flying type positions. So started doing that, and then again, one day my recruiter said, yeah, because of budget cuts and sequestration, they're actually canceling all officer training school boards for the next year. And yeah, that was unfortunate because I didn't want to wait around for a year, not really moving forward in life. So that was another decision point. And then at some point, I just decided, well, I can always just enlist and then try to get into officer training school later, as enlisted. And that's what I decided to do. I just went next door to the enlisted recruiter and started going that route.
And that's when mom and dad lost their minds round two.
Yes. Yep.
Because now not only were you not going to go in as an officer, you're going to go in enlisted. And I just want to say it is beyond admirable. Anyone that serves in the military, it's just so incredible. It's so special because less than 1% choose to serve our country. So not
Hmm.
only is it incredible for the people that make that conscious decision to do it, but for their families. Because, guys, I can't even tell you how shocking that was and how terrified we were of, even though it was the Air Force, you still go, well, is he going to be in harm's way? Where is he going to be? And anybody listening to this that has sons or daughters in the military or understands this at all knows this panic. So, my brother, who has a college degree and didn't get accepted into officer training school because they apparently lost their mind during that season,
Hmm.
enlisted in the Air Force. And I truly think it was the greatest thing you've ever done. Like
Yeah,
it
it worked
set
out
you,
really well.
it worked out really well.
Yeah.
So your first base assignment was in Germany, and that
Yep.
was an incredible
Spangdahlem.
opportunity. Okay.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I feel like ever since you enlisted, you kind of were, and I know I'm your sister, so I'm saying it, but you were the cream that floated to the top because you excelled in every facet that you could. You literally
Hmm.
rose to the occasion. So you achieved a
Sure.
lot of initial accolades as an enlisted person. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so, you know, because the ultimate goal was to commission and be a commissioned officer.
Hmm.
So I went in with that mindset day one, like what can I do to make myself competitive to earn a commission in the Air Force. So starting in basic training, a lot of people say just keep your head down and just try not to get noticed, and then you'll just make it through. And then, once you're out, you can like start your Air Force career. But I was the dorm chief, which was like the leader of my flight. And, I did all this stuff. I ended up getting honor graduate out of basic training. Then when I went to tech school, I volunteered to be an airman leader, which is just added responsibility, basically. Stuff like that. At Spangdahlem, I did base honor guard, which if you don't know, it's when you go to like funerals and stuff, and or the Super Bowl, Honor Guard was carrying the flag. So they do ceremonies and things like that. And it just looks really good for applications, and it's just, a really rewarding experience as well. So I did a lot of those types of things to make myself competitive because, yeah, day one, I just said, I'm gonna earn a commission. So these are the things I need.
Period. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you essentially were building your internal resume inside of the military to apply to
Yep.
officer training school. Okay, so at this point, you have just been denied from OTS one time because the second round they disabled and didn't offer it. So now you're
Mhm.
enlisted. Now you apply again, right? Because at a certain point
Yes.
you applied again. Okay, so you applied again. What happened that time?
Okay, so the second time, I it kind of snuck up on me. They came out with a board and it was really last minute and I threw together an application essentially just by myself. And I honestly don't even know if it met the board because there were just things not great with it. And you
Mhm.
could tell like when I looked back at it, like a year or two later, I was like, man, it is clear nobody else looked at this other than, at the time, Airman First Class Lazarus. So yeah, so I don't even know if that one made it to the panel. But needless to say, I didn't get accepted that time. Um, and at that point, I think I was a year on station. So it was, yeah, pretty early on still.
This was rough on you and us because we're
Hmm.
like, we wanted you out of being enlisted. But you say all the time, and I think it's so true that well, we'll get to that, but you made it
Hmm.
through eventually. And you're a
Hmm.
better um officer now because you know what those guys went through. So I feel like it really was all meant to be. So
Yeah.
okay, so now round three, because you have to wait in between application processes. So now you're applying for the third time. You have all your ducks in your row, you're prepared, you're fully prepared, all the right letters of recommendation,
Hmm.
application is complete, you have all these accolades on your application because you've done all this relevant stuff in the military, which I just want to pause and say this is so important for even people outside of the military. If you don't get the job you want, there's so many things you can be doing to prep yourself to apply again to make yourself look better. So that's essentially what you were doing. You applied round three. What happened then?
Yep. So round three was actually I was on deployment, and I had made it known to my supervisors and my commander, saying, "Hey, I want to apply to this board. Here's when the application's due. I need help, basically." And that was a big thing too, because I didn't really like asking for help earlier on, but you realize pretty quickly, that's what these people are there for. They're here to help, and don't be afraid to ask for it. So. I did
Did
my
they encourage
application.
you? Like, were they happy to be a part of that help process? Were they like, oh,
Yes.
great, let us help you? Okay.
Yeah. Because, for them too, they just, as non-commissioned officers, and senior NCOs and commanders, they're there to help lift their airmen up and, be the best they could be, basically. So, yeah, I did my application. It first went through a couple of senior non-commissioned officers. They looked over the package, sent it back with edits. I changed it around. It eventually made its way up to the commander out there who did his own edits and everything like that. And then eventually submitted that one. And then, yeah, a few months later, I was still on deployment. And in our initial morning brief, they said, "Oh, we have an announcement. Airman Lazarus come up." And yeah, it was a whole thing. And they said, "Hey, you're going to be an officer." And it was really cool. And
That
I
is
remember,
awesome.
yeah, over my, I guess it would have been lunch, I guess, I went back to my little room and called you guys and told you. So,
Yeah, I'll never forget it because it was my birthday and I
hmm
burst into tears. I was
Yeah.
so excited. I feel like we were all on this emotional roller coaster together. And it
Yeah.
was so awesome to hear that they finally recognized my brother. This is what you
Hmm.
were destined to do. So
Yeah.
I love that you're telling this story because, again, I feel like you have this math stats degree. You didn't know what you were going to do with it. You ended up at a desk job that you hated and you made a pivot and change that we all were freaked out about, but you knew it was the right decision for you. And it wasn't an easy one. And you kept crusading over and over, which I think is such a testament to you can't give up on things you want. Sometimes they're hard. You have to keep at it, even if you're told no multiple times. In your case, it
Hmm.
took round three to get to where you are. You went into OTS, I feel like, fairly quickly, right? Like, how did that all go down?
Yeah, so we got back from deployment as a squadron, and my squadron was moving, actually, like physically moving from Germany to Italy. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of thought I would make the move with them because I had heard, once you get accepted to OTS, it takes a long time sometimes to actually go. But I basically got back, and a month later, after I got back from deployment, I was packing my bags and heading to officer training school in Alabama.
That's
So it was,
awesome.
yeah, very rapidly, just my life immediately changed. It was pretty crazy.
And you have continued to work so hard. So now, fast forward,
Hmm.
you are a pilot. You did
Yes, I
it,
am.
Jer. I'm
Yep,
so
we're
proud of
here. We
you.
made it.
My brother is rad. Super, super proud, beaming with pride. Okay, so you're a pilot, and tell everybody, what plane do you fly?
The C-17 Globemaster 3.
And that's like a big cargo plane.
Yes.
And just for some fun facts, can you share anything about like some cool things that you may have transported at some point?
Being on the East Coast, we do a lot of presidential support missions. So I don't know if you saw the Daytona 500, the pace car this year was actually the Beast, which is
Yeah, I
like,
did.
yeah. So we've transported that before for like multiple presidents, and then things like that. Everything out of DC, and then also I was involved in the Kabul airlift a few years ago now. So that
Hmm.
was interesting as well. That
You
was,
rescued Afghanistan refugees, right?
yep, yep, out of Kabul. My crew did 4 runs in there and transporting in supplies and out people, basically. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's humble. He's a hero. He saved thousands of people. It's incredible.
Mm.
So, okay. So now you are truly doing what you love. You love your job.
I do. It is very busy sometimes, and at times the work-life balance isn't amazing, but yeah, it's really a feeling you can't beat when you're up there at cruise and you're kind of looking around and you're just at 30,000 feet, and yeah, best office chair in the world. So,
That's right. Did
mhm.
you ever imagine that your math degree would lead you to being a pilot in the Air Force?
I did not at all,
But
but
it is helpful, right?
it
You use
is, yeah.
math, I feel like
We actually
regularly.
do use a
Yeah,
decent amount of math, and the preferred majors for the rated positions, the flying positions are STEM. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense.
for sure. Absolutely. So, what advice would you have to any new college students or even kids that don't go to college? Because not everybody goes, and that's totally okay. When I hear,
Mhm.
oh, my kids, enlisted in the Army or the Marines or whatever, it's wonderful to hear. But what advice would you have for anybody interested in the military or even thinking, that sounds interesting?
Yeah, I would say talk to someone that is in the military to give you the rundown.
A
You can
recruiter or
throw,
just a random person in the
I would
military?
say if you know a friend or someone
Yes.
in the military
Okay.
first, but yeah, I mean, talk to a recruiter too eventually. Do your research because it is a commitment. For pilots, it's, a 10-year contract that we have to sign, and that's after we graduate pilot training. So really more like 11 or 12 years. But if not, even just if you're enlisting, it's, 4 years minimum that you're giving to the government. So it's a big decision, but you get a lot of benefits once you're in school, paid for. A lot of people take advantage of that. And it's actually pretty surprising, if you think about the enlisted force maybe 50 years ago versus now, a large percentage of like the enlisted Air Force has a college degree. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's super awesome. And I also think it's important to point out women because I think so often when we think of the military, we just think of, our sons, boys. But
Hmm.
Your wife, my sister-in-law, is also a badass pilot in the Air Force,
Yeah,
and
she's flying
she
right now,
did.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just feel like it's so important to recognize it's a great future for women too. I mean, it's
Hmm.
incredible. So my
Yeah,
sister-in-law's future is amazing and her path totally different than yours, but still incredible. So men and
yeah.
women.
Yeah, so I would just say, Air Force has provided me a pretty sweet life, and I wouldn't change it.
Jer, I'm so grateful that you came on to tell everybody your story. I know
Yeah.
so many of my friends know your story because I'm so proud of you, but I think it's so important for other people to know because your path is different than most and your
Hmm.
story is special. So I'm so grateful for you sharing.
Yeah, of course.
How happy were you when I said, "Hey, I need you on my podcast"? Were you like, "Damn."
Yeah, it was just another thing I needed to do.
You love things.
I love things.
Jer,
Yeah,
thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I love you bunches.
love you too.
Okay, well, I hope everybody enjoyed that interview. A little different perspective and take than my typical content. Um, and I apologize for my audio. I sound like I'm in a tunnel. I clearly had some issues with my microphone during that interview, and I am sorry for the way that sounded. So we'll make sure I triple check that next time I interview. In the meantime, if you have any questions, I will leave my email in the show notes. Until then, I will talk to you next week.